Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film High Rise. High Rise is a British satirical take on man and technology in the modern world, and it is based on the book of the same name by J.G. Ballard, which is a famous book which I am not really aware of until I saw this movie. So a lot of the complaints people usually have about this movie, I will not have them coming in from the perspective of just watching it as a film rather than comparing it to its source material and complaining about the differences. However, I think its 70s kind of surrealist Nicholas Roeg kind of influence take on the material was actually fairly interesting. In fact, I rarely see films that try to take an aesthetic from a previous decade do them as well as this does. The art direction is absolutely flawless. There's some shots in this that look like they're from some Vogue photo shoot. It's very cinematic. It really knows what it's doing with the style. I don't know if the substance lands as well as the style does, but the style of this film is absolutely amazing. It was beautiful to watch, especially in the early parts where it takes on more of a Kubrickian kind of 70s Clockwork Orange feel to it. It kind of reminds me of a recent film I saw, like Synchronicity, where it's like, yeah, duh, this is influenced. In that film's case, was influenced by Blade Runner, and in this you'll be like, well, duh, it was influenced by Zardoz, A Clockwork Orange, and Nicholas Roeg's films. And it's very blatant about that, but it's actually very good at that. It's very beautiful. It knows how to get that to work for it and get that to work within this satire and make a really interesting, compelling, confusing, weird kind of cult film, but the one that's kind of a unique cinematic experience enough to make it kind of warrant you getting through and trying to understand this weird surrealist high-rise satire on the British class system, or really the world class system, but it's mainly British, so we're going to go with that. I think it's really the British class system. Anyway, in an alternate timeline of the 1970s, a Dr. Robert Lang has moved into this new high-rise tower on the outskirts of London. It's a luxurious apartment building complex built by an esteemed architect, Anthony Royal, played by Jeremy Irons. Robert Lang is, of course, played by Tom Hiddleston. He lives there in a luxurious apartment, and he starts moving up the social ladder and understanding how the lower income families are living on the bottom floor. The higher you are up in the building, the higher your income bracket basically is. And as Robert Lang has lived there, things start to fall apart as elevators don't work, electricity doesn't work, people aren't getting as much heat in the lower sections as they are in the higher sections. Certain food and allocations like the pool that they have isn't allowed for kids' parties and for kids to play in, but they're allowed for the rich people to have their parties. A certain amount of food isn't as available for the lower floors as it is for the higher floors, and things start to fall apart and go into anarchy as this experiment that the high-rise was doing eventually starts to fall apart and go into chaos. So as I said before, I hadn't read the book High Rise that this film was based on, and when I just read the Wikipedia plot summary, which I know is not the same as reading the book, and I'm not going to act like it was, but I will say that plot summary made a little more sense, and it made a lot more of a compelling argument. Watching this film is kind of like watching a crazy sketch where things get dystopian really fast and someone makes a joke. Well, that escalated rather quickly. And it does feel like I'm almost watching a strange kind of sketch Mr. Show type of logic in it, but it's not necessarily doing jokes, I'd say. It's not necessarily being funny. There are parts that are like deadpan funny, but the way it's directed and the way it's told, you'd almost really expect it to kind of be funnier, and it's not. And it's moving in that kind of like weird, like cartoon, almost like a crazy Futurama episode spread out into a movie, which you'd expect from kind of a crazy 70s sci-fi movie or a 70s influenced sci-fi movie, which I guess maybe they were going for because they're looking at the same things which would influence Futurama. It just doesn't really feel like it's taking the time to really tell the story and tell the satire as much. If you look at something like George Orwell's Animal Farm, a lot of that is very important to telling the story. It's not like, well, let's just skip over that crap and the pigs get in the house and it's fine. High Rise, you really need to understand that a little more, and you kind of get parts of it, but the way it likes to be told in this very 70s way goes against really telling that story, but that doesn't mean it's a bad movie. I think you might think, oh, well, that means this sucks because it couldn't do that. No, I kind of like the experience of it, and I didn't really have as many problems with that until later I read what the book was like, and it was like, hey, why didn't you do that? I mean, it does feel like a crazy Community episode in the way it moves, but kind of directed by a guy who really does music video direction or TV commercials, and the guy, Ben Wheatley, actually does. He's done other features which I have not seen. He's directed 2 Doctor Who episodes from the more recent Doctor Who series or show in the 8th season or series, whichever you want to call it, with Peter Capaldi. So I've definitely seen those. He's done a lot of music videos and TV commercials, and this feels like somebody who has that experience technical wise. He has some really beautiful cinematography in it, and it feels like music video logic in terms of the cinematography and things. It feels almost unreal how well composed some of this stuff is. Like, he really almost is over ambitious in what he's doing, but it's kind of like lovely to see that through this. So I kind of like let it go in a lot of places I probably wouldn't normally let a movie like this go if it was worse made, but that's not the movie I'm reviewing, so maybe who cares. But he does a really good job directing this, especially with the cinematography by Laurie Rose. It really brings this film out, and it does feel like someone who has to do commercial work for hire stuff, and then when they're making their own feature, they really let go and go crazy and don't have to listen to the yes man and the suits and the people at the advertising agency. They can really do whatever they want, man, and they're gonna go crazy. He obviously learned the lessons he had learned technically from those, but he at least didn't understand how those things told stories, and understanding the storytelling of that, he instead really wanted to go crazy with it, which to me is what made this film kind of interesting and a cool viewing experience because of that flow to it. I can also understand how that could be construed as annoying. A lot of what's this saying about the class system, and it's kind of interesting because this came out originally in the early 70s, and a lot of how he's transposing this feels like he's talking about what was happening culturally in England within the 70s, which obviously a lot of that happened after the book came out, but he's kind of like transposing that onto that, and even as the end part with Thatcher. I get he wants to attach certain meanings to it, and obviously a lot of people have read into because the high-rise is kind of one to itself, and at a certain point you're like, did society become this or just this high-rise building? And it kind of makes it a little unsure. Like, for a little bit you're like, is this like a weird future, or is this the 70s? You're not exactly sure. He kind of like doesn't want to spell it out for you, which I liked. I can understand if you find that poor storytelling, but I thought worked for it. But having like that direct of a reference point to it, especially something that doesn't source material wise have that, kind of makes it say things that sometimes are like a little creepier and like kind of pointing it politically that maybe necessarily it doesn't have. You can kind of read into it more, which to be honest could probably be a lot more powerful if he had not done that. But as much as I'm kind of slagging it off, I think it does a lot of interesting things within. I actually kind of prefer this in a lot of places to Snowpiercer, although maybe Snowpiercer as a whole is a better movie. I think this is maybe a little more ambitious in what it's trying to do than Snowpiercer was. I wasn't really a big fan of Snowpiercer, but I like what it's kind of saying about class systems. But it's also interesting it tried to do a more surreal 70s type of film, and that's very much not in vogue right now. I mean, this is kind of like a cool cult movie, but I kind of wonder like how could they possibly let this movie kind of happen now? I think the concept of this could work now, but I think Ben Wheatley's approach does not fit within our current cinematic landscape. I like that about it, but I almost understand the negative reviews and understand the positive reviews. I'm kind of maybe a little more in the middle. It is far too long, frankly. Sometimes I'm like, what is this? How long is this going on? It's just kind of crazy in what it's doing, and I don't think it maybe explained that well enough, but that's part of me thinks that's also part of the charm. Also, Tom Hiddleston's performance, which is really essential to one of these movies. He's really the weight. He's really the thing that grounds this movie. He's really the person who gives this movie a soul and lets you follow someone and gives you some sort of structure and all those things. Because of his performance, he seems to be able to work within that. He's a little more toned down and quieter than you'd expect him from when he's playing someone like Loki. I think he's rather good at that, but he's able to play within the very surreal moments very well. He's almost like very game for almost anything as an actor, and I feel like watching a movie like this, you can almost see him as like a character actor when he's older, because he's just ready to take on what he needs to do as the storytelling element as an actor. And that's when you can tell really smart actors, because they understand they're as much of a storyteller as the screenplay. I like Jeremy Irons a lot, pretty much in anything, but him as the architect is particularly good, as well as Sienna Miller. I think this is probably Luke Evans' best role I've seen him in to date as this documentary filmmaker. He's a little too much in some places, and I actually like the score by Clint Marshall, and particularly the two covers of SOS, one by Portishead and one is a orchestral cover by Clint Marshall. Both are really good. I'm not exactly sure what SOS had to do with the movie, but it was cool. Maybe in SOS that things are going fucking nuts. That's probably it. This film was in development for a long time, and actually Nicholas Roeg was slated to direct it in the late 70s. That did not work out. It's actually been a passion project for the producer of this film, Jeremy Thomas, for a very long time. And even the director of Cube, whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, was attached at a certain point, who I actually think he could have probably done a really cool version of High Rise. And it eventually got made with Ben Wheatley somehow. I'm not exactly sure how that suddenly worked out, but you know, development processes are what they are. It's interesting that Nicholas Rowe, because this film is so influenced by him, was actually the first person who was ever attached to direct this back in the late 70s. It's, I think, a very surreal, strange, cultish, very video on demand art movie. It's very much not commercial enough for at least American audiences. I think it came out a lot wider in England, but over here in America, I don't think it's really going to sell, especially even for the art movie crowd. They like things that have this aura of importance to it, and this is kind of almost too wacky and surreal and strange for any of that, which I think is really cool about it. Frankly, we should probably have a lot more movies like this, and it makes me think Ben Wheatley, if he can maybe bring a little more story to his films, could really be a great director. Right now, he's more of a style director, which I think kind of works for his interpretation of High Rise, but I still think someone could probably make a better adaptation of High Rise, even though I don't know much about the book, but I still think someone could probably make a better adaptation of the book down the road. But still, I don't think that makes this High Rise any worse for it, really. I still like Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, even though I like, the Peter Jackson 3 Lord of the Rings films. I just like them for absolutely separate reasons. And maybe someone will do that to High Rise. Probably not, because, or maybe they will, I don't know. But I think a lot of the themes in this can actually speak to us now, but a lot of the surreal nature, like Elizabeth Moss is in this, I forgot to mention her. She has an English accent, which gets better as it goes on. I don't particularly love her performance in this, but she's pregnant in it, and she's pregnant, and all this stuff keeps going on. It keeps getting more dystopian, and she is like super pregnant at the beginning of the movie, and I was like, is she fake pregnant? Is she real pregnant? What's going on with this? It's like really crazy how long she's pregnant. It was very strange, all of that. It just kind of add to the surrealism and the whole like misunderstanding, like what exactly is going on here. Like sometimes you're kind of like looking for meaning, and I don't think this film is like searching for that meaning, so you're just kind of sorting through the whole thing and maybe not exactly finding it, but you kind of realize it's fun just kind of not really even knowing exactly what's going on. High Rise is kind of one of those strange kind of cult movies if you like Zardoz and you like that early 70s style. It's definitely a movie you should absolutely see and you definitely be into, but I don't think it's like this crazy cult allegorical movie that's going to make everyone praise what it says about class system. I think, there's probably more commercial movies that say more and better things about the class system than High Rise does. High Rise just kind of expects that you will get these things from its crazy plot, and that element to it really doesn't work, which is a shame because that's really what it's pushing forward. But if you watch it for the ride that it really is, you'll have a better time with it rather than if you're looking for the satire of it, which is a shame because it's an actual satire. So as a satire, I think it semi sort of works, but it doesn't really, because you're not really getting a clear message from it. But as kind of a stylish, strange kind of satire that messes around and like expects you to kind of take up things from it, I think it's actually kind of an interesting watch, and one that'll at least make you think why they stopped doing these kind of stylishly strange, almost nihilistic dystopian 70s movies, especially at the time we are culturally and politically, and wish more people had the attitude to look through these kind of things as you wish the director could have looked through his own style and maybe found a little bit more of that satire. So if you have seen High Rise and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.